Several agricultural chemicals such as DDT, aldrin, dieldrin, chloridane, and heptachlor have been banned from general use because of potential hazards to man and animals. With me today to talk about the review of chemical pesticides is Ed Johnson, who is the Deputy Assistant Administrator with the Environmental Protection Agency, and he's in charge of the pesticide programs. And Mr. Johnson, let's talk about how often these pesticides are reviewed. Is this done regularly, or is it done one time only?
The federal pesticide law requires that we review each pesticide product every 5 years to make sure that it's still in tune with modern thinking and modern data requirements. But we are working on a special review right now, which is over and above that 5-year renewal. The Congress told us to go back and take a look at every pesticide that had ever been registered before under previous statutes and make sure that they should remain on the market.
So this is a continuing job. It's not just a one-time review of a chemical pesticide.
Yes, it is. We've constantly got to be looking at them.
Does the fact that if you determine that a pesticide contains a potentially harmful substance, does it mean then that that product is automatically withdrawn from the market?
Not by any means, Larry. Our statute requires that we do a full benefit risk evaluation prior to take any action on removing a pesticide from the market. This means that we've got to look at the economic consequences of removing that pesticide for some or all of its uses, that we've got to take a look at the risks posed not only by that pesticide, but also by possible alternatives that may come in behind it to take its place if we do take it off the market. And we need to look at the economic consequences and risks to consumers as well to determine on a use-by-use basis whether the uses should remain, be restricted, or be completely removed from the marketplace.
One of the people who immediately becomes affected when pesticides are banned, of course, is an agricultural producer who uses chemical pesticides. Does he have a voice whenever a chemical or pesticide is under question?
Yes, he does. In making the kind of a risk-benefit decision on uses of pesticides that I just described, we can't make a good decision without having input from farmers, from people at universities, from manufacturers, and from environmental groups. We need all of this to make a good decision. And therefore, when we decide to review a pesticide in depth, we tell the public about it so that they can get their information into us and we can use it in our decision making.
Ed, what do you think that pesticides in the future are going to be like? Are they going to be similar to what we have today, or will they be distinctively different?
I think we're going to move away from the broad-scale toxic chemicals that we seem to be using now and moving toward more selective pesticides. Included in those more selective pesticides, I believe, will be pheromones, sex attractants, juvenile hormones, and things of this sort, which are much more selective. And while they may be more expensive to the farmer, I believe that they'll perform perhaps better for him than some of the broad-scale toxicants. I also think that the toxicants will be used more as part of overall integrated pest management programs, and the toxic chemicals applied when they're really needed rather than on a calendar basis.
Ed Johnson of the Environmental Protection Agency, thanks for being with us today. I'm Larry Quinn with the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington. The Environmental Protection Agency has made a recent decision regarding an agricultural weed killer that farmers commonly know as Treflan. And with me today to talk about that decision is Ed Johnson, who is Deputy Assistant Administrator of EPA for pesticide programs. And Ed, tell us what your decision was regarding this chemical known as Treflan.
Well, as a benefit to the listeners, I might point out that the agency was requested by 2 congressmen and the Migrant Legal Action Program to suspend the use of Treflan pesticides on the grounds that they posed an imminent hazard to farmers and farm workers. The agency, after an in-depth review of both the benefits and the risks which we might expect to see over the next couple of years of continued use of Treflan, decided not to suspend the use of these compounds, but rather to let their use continue pending our full-scale evaluation of benefits and risks.
Treflan is a chemical that's used primarily on what crops?
It's primarily used on soybeans and cotton as a pre-emergence herbicide, but there are some fruit and vegetable uses as well.
Now, you say that you have initially decided to leave it on the market. Does that mean that is your final action, or is this just a preliminary action?
This is a preliminary action. We required an in-depth review of Treflan products because they contain a nitrosamine compound, which is shown to be a potential human cancer-causing agent. In looking at a suspension action, we looked at the benefits and the risks of removing the product 2 years earlier while we were making a final decision, rather than leaving it on the market while that final decision was being made. That assessment indicated that the cancer risks were extremely small for continued use over that 2-year period. But the costs to both the farmer and eventually the American consumer were quite large, being on the order of $500 million or more to the farmer this year, and eventually, when the agricultural system had adjusted itself, some $3.8 million to the consumer as a whole in the United States. So we will be continuing our review.
You say that nitrosamines seem to be the culprit within Treflan. Have you found nitrosamine in other pesticides, and if so, what are you doing about those?
Well, nitrosamines, first of all, are a generic name for perhaps 100 different types of chemicals. Some of these nitrosamine compounds are suspect human cancer-causing agents. Others cause no problem whatsoever. And still others, we really don't know what the hazard might be because they've not been properly tested. Nitrosamines generally are found in a large number of pesticide products. And the agency is now reviewing those products to see the levels of nitrosamine and the type of nitrosamine that might be contained in each. If the nitrosamine is one that we suspect causes a hazard, then we will be putting it through an in-depth benefit-risk analysis.
Does the EPA have any action short of a ban of a pesticide?
Yes, the agency can restrict the use of pesticides, and it can restrict them in one of 2 ways. First, to use by a certified applicator only, and that's a person who's been properly trained and judged to be competent in the use of hazardous pesticides. And secondly, the agency can limit by regulation the uses to be made of a pesticide. That is, we can limit it to certain uses, or we can limit it to use in an integrated pest management program only.
Ed Johnson of the EPA, thanks for being with us. I'm Larry Quinn with the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington. Department of Agriculture agencies, the Rural Electrification Administration and the Farmers Home Administration, recently launched a new program to help rural homeowners conserve heating and cooling energy in the home. My guest today is John Behringer, who is Community Development Coordinator for the Rural Electrification Administration. And John, tell us about this new program.
Well, it's an excellent example of how the private sector is working with the government to help homeowners insulate their homes. The way this program works, the Farmers Home Administration is going to provide the loan funds for low and moderate income families, and the electric cooperatives around the country are going to help insulate the homes.
So it's a cooperative effort then between the cooperatives and the government in this case. What kind of loans, what are they for? What kind of things can be done with these loans?
Well, the funds can be used for weather stripping, caulking around the windows, can be used for storm windows and storm doors. It can be used for attic insulation and other types of materials to help tighten up the home.
So just about anything in the area of weatherizing the home.
Yes.
How is the loan program then administered?
It's the way that it works, the electric cooperative will arrange to visit the family, try to show what he might need to weatherize his home, arrange for a contractor to do the job, and come back and inspect it. They'll also make the arrangements with FHA for the funds to do the job.
So it's a complete package. It's not just a loan program, but an advice program as well.
Certainly. Yes.
Now, what about the loan terms? Just what kind of terms are you talking about here?
We're talking about a maximum loan of $1,500 to be paid back over a 5-year period at 8%. And those payments can be made on the family's power bill. As they pay their power bill, they'll be paying for the loan.
And it would be split up over that period of time then?
Oh, up to 5 years,
5
if the family wants that long to pay it back. Right.
Is home weatherization a good investment?
It certainly is. There's no question about it. A lot of energy is wasted, and we know if we can cut the waste, it's going to be an investment. A family that'll spend $300 to put some insulation in the attic should get their money back, I'd say 3 years. They should recover their costs. If they go a little further with storm windows and doors, take a little longer, maybe 5 years, to recover their costs and the energy saved on their bill.
If nothing else, it may be an investment to keep their utility bills at a stable level.
That's true, because we all know that power bills are going up, but if we can find a way to stabilize them, to keep them down, we're all ahead.
Thank you, John Behringer of the Rural Electrification Administration, for being with us to talk about this program. And if you'd like more information about it, we'll send you this informational brochure if you write us here at Agriculture TV, Washington, D.C. 20250, and we'll send you a copy of this. It says Home Weatherization Loans Through the Rural Electric Cooperatives. I'm Larry Quinn with the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington. Energy to keep our farms in operation amounts to only about 3% of all the energy we use in this country, yet it is vital and it's become increasingly expensive for our farmers today. With me today to talk about the energy requirements of vegetable farming is Mr. Wynn, N.A. Wynn, who is with the Economic Research Service of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And Mr. Wynn, what cultural practices in the production of vegetables seem to be the heavy energy users?
The manufacture of fertilizer requires the most energy used on vegetables. Other practices that require a lot of energy are field operations and overhead usage. Overhead usage includes use of pickup and automobile on the farm.
Let's talk about fertilization for a moment. Of course, it's more critical in certain crops than others, but we certainly don't want to do away with fertilizing. How can we minimize the energy expenditure here?
But the use of soil tests to determine what nutrients are in the soil so that you can get proper recommendations from your extension service, and then determine what minor elements you might need for the crop.
That the purpose is, of course, not to apply it if you don't need it and to apply the appropriate amount when you do need it.
Right.
I understand that you can actually have the leaves of plants analyzed too to give you some cue to the minor elements.
Yes, during the growing season, if you're having a problem with wrong color on the plant or it doesn't look like it's responding properly, you can analyze your leaves and apply fertilizer to the growing crop.
Irrigation is one of the areas that does require energy use for vegetable production. How can we save money and energy in this case?
We can save money and energy on irrigating vegetables by having an efficient pumping unit. The pumping unit can be tested by your local utility, electric company, or the people that install pumps.
Even the method of irrigation, some methods seem to be a little more efficient than others.
Yes, flood irrigation uses a lot of water. It may not use a lot of energy if you have a source of water where you can gravity feed it to the field. But sprinkler systems require less energy than gravity if you had, and than flood irrigation if you have to pump it.
Well, let's talk about some of the field operations, I guess even all the way down to tractor tires. Can that be an energy user too?
Yes, tractor tires can be used to conserve energy. There's a new type tractor tire known as a radial tire that had been used in Europe for several years. Manufacturers here are producing those today. The radial tractor tire can save up to 20% of the cost of operating in the field. It'll save about 10% on your time, which means less wear on your tractor, means less labor that you'd have to pay for, and very efficient.
Thank you for those tips on energy saving, and for those who are vegetable producers and would like more on that, there has been a book published by the Economic Research Service in cooperation with the Federal Energy Administration. If you'll write us here at Agriculture TV, Washington, D.C. 20250, we'll send you your copy. I'm Larry Quinn with the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington. cost of energy has nearly doubled in the past 10 years, with most of that increase coming within the last 3 years. Well, farmers are concerned about holding down their production or food production cost by saving energy. And with me today to talk about energy-saving ideas for the orchard producer, we have N.A. Wynn, who is with the Economic Research Service of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And Mr. Wynn, let's talk about some of the energy requirements for orchard growers. What are the heaviest users? I understand that one of the biggest areas is about 10% of the energy is actually getting the crop to production or renovating the older trees or groves. But aside from that, what is the big energy user?
The biggest energy user is frost production, Larry, frost protection.
Actually protecting the young plants early in the spring and the fall?
For certain crops, for the citrus crops, it's protecting them during the winter months when they have mature fruit on the trees. But for budding crops in the spring, apples, peaches, when a frost comes along, it'll kill the buds if they aren't protected from the cold weather. Some farmers use orchard heaters to keep the buds from freezing. Some farmers use wind machines, which pull down warm air from on up 40 or 50 feet up into the sky. Other farmers use sprinkler irrigation to keep from freezing.
Irrigating to keep from freezing?
Yes. Water, when it freezes, releases a lot of energy. And as long as you can keep water going on these buds during the freeze, the buds won't freeze. The bud doesn't freeze until about 24 to 27 degrees, and water on the buds will hold them to 32 degrees.
So from what you've described, there is quite an expenditure of energy for frost protection. How much of the overall total is it?
About 44% of the total cost of producing orchard crops is
almost half
on frost protection, right.
What are some of the other energy areas that we should be concerned about if we're in the business of producing orchards?
Fertilizer requires about 17%. Field operations are another 12% of the energy used in producing orchard crops.
So then if we want to reduce the energy cost, is there anything we can do to save money and energy too in that area?
Yes, we could have the soil tested to determine what nutrients are available in the soil and get recommendations as to what nutrients to apply and what amounts to apply them at.
Now, irrigation for orchards is somewhat different than a lot of other crops. They've made some real advances in efficiency, so it probably is not too heavy an energy user then in irrigation.
No, irrigation doesn't require but about 6% of the energy required to produce orchard crops, but we can still cut the cost of irrigation by going to other systems of irrigation. There's a new method of drip irrigation whereby they put down plastic pipe with emitters that just water the roots of the trees. And this.
If you'd like more information about what we've been talking about, write us here at Agriculture TV, Washington, D.C. 20250, and we'll send you a copy of this booklet. I'm Larry Quinn with the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington.
It's usually catastrophic in that area.
So we hope that the research that you're doing there in Alaska will certainly give us an opportunity to, in this case, offset problems before they ever occur.
It's one of the few opportunities we've had of this kind.
And then the eventual use of the land will also depend how a forest landowner will manage it. For instance, if he wanted to use it for recreation purposes, he would probably manage it differently than for other purposes.
Yes, like John Zazada described, he's working on the biological responses of the timber stand to various treatments. Well, the timber being the major vegetation can be treated in a wide range of treatments, and within this area the manager then can select the one that meets the kind of management he wants for recreational wildlife or so on.
Thank you for being with us to talk about some of that timber research which will help us to ensure that timber remains a renewable resource. Now let's return to Lane Beatty and Don Elder.
Thank you, Larry Quinn. Well, Don, what's shaping up for Across the Fence next week?
Well, we have a segment on winter safety outdoors for skiers, hikers, and those who are unfortunate enough to be caught in their automobile in a blizzard. We hope they don't have to use our advice. On the Alaska series, we take a look at how they're producing Alaska-sized potatoes, some vegetable research, and some suggestions on buying firewood. And you have a very distinguished guest next week.
Secretary of Agriculture Earl Butz. First time we will have been on the show in over a year or so, talking about food prices next year, looking ahead to next year, exports, farm prices, who knows.
That's what keeps our balance of trade in good
Whatever may cross his mind. That about wraps it up for this week on Across the Fence. Join us again in 7 days, won't you?